Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about some of the players and coaches under the most pressure as we head into this weekend, and now it's time to do a little bit of a wrap-up. We'll get into a couple of different headlines and things around the world of college football real quick, and then we'll get some injury news before we get into this weekend. So let's start with some headlines, and we'll get into the ACC and the Big 10, or Big 12 to start, excuse me. It sounds like the conversations between these two parties have started around the future of college football, what that's going to look like for these two groups, how it's going to fit into what the Big 10 and the SEC want to do. A lot of different things on the table for this one. It sounds like it could be a couple of these different super leagues on the table, whether it's College Student Football League or the Project Rudy. A lot of different ideas that the ACC and the Big 12 are a little bit more interested in than the SEC and the Big 10 are because of their standing in this whole thing. They want to be locked in. They want to be in a position where they are firmly in the Super League. They're firmly in whatever the future of college football looks like. The SEC and the Big 10 kind of want to dictate what the future of college football looks like, and they want them to be at the top of it. So a lot of different things that will happen over the next little bit. There's obviously something that the ACC probably had to do, and the ACC and the Big 12 probably had to do, because you don't join forces, you're not going to be able to stand up to those two that have pretty much joined forces throughout the last little bit, and you're gonna have to meet in February to figure out all the future of the 12-team playoff, of a lot of different stuff around college football. And you're not going to be able to hold up if you're not united in this. If you're not with each other, if you're not having each other's back in this moment, it's going to be a really, really long day. So this makes total sense, these two kind of getting together. Sounds like a lot of different things were discussed, whether it was, a possible alliance, a possible merger between the two conferences to make a super conference. A lot of different things have been kind of kicked around in this, and I think it comes down to a lot of different debates that you've had around college football, and it comes down to that guy in a lot of different ways. Brett Yormark is a very intense fella. He's a very intense guy, definitely a guy that knows how to get stuff done, came from the TV world, is officially in college sports, and it's been very clear that he's from the TV world. Definitely a very intense negotiator, a guy that can get a lot of things done, and you're in a position right now where you're going to need that guy. You're going to need to go into that room with a lot of confidence, with a lot of assuredness in yourself, and it's going to be one of these guys that's going to need to step up to the plate and kind of take on a Greg Sankey, to take on a Tony Petitti, and see where they stand at the end of this. Brett Yormark, probably the quote-unquote enforcer of this group, the guy that can stand up in front of a room and gain a lot of respect, and we'll see what happens with this. But you're definitely in a position where the Big 12 and the ACC just kind of have to do this. One way or the other, they're going to have to be able to merge and have their interests kind of be aligned, because you're going to have to attack the other two. One way or the other, you're going to have to work with / attack the other two and figure out where you stand at the end of it. But overall, a lot of different things were discussed. A possible schedule merger, which I would absolutely love. One of the things that I've been pushing for quite some time is just all these conferences to have a little bit of a scheduling merger where all four of them are in a pool. They kind of rotate around, play different conferences every single year. But obviously something that is a little bit far-fetched as of right this moment. Hopefully we're heading in that direction. We'll see what happens with this alliance, and definitely will be one that in February, when they meet to figure out what the 12-team playoff will look like, it'll be a very explosive meeting, I have to imagine. But let's get into some coaching carousel stuff, and let's start with the weirdest one of the bunch. Bill Belichick sounds like he is interviewed for the UNC opening. I don't think this is going to happen, if I'm being totally honest. I do think it's one of those things that was really cool to see across their Twitter page, was really cool to think about. I don't think he's taking the UNC job. I think there might be a little bit of interest there. I don't expect him to be the next coach of the Tar Heels. So a really incredible kind of thing that I did not expect by any means. We'll see what happens. Who knows? Maybe there's a little bit of an opening here, but it doesn't sound like there's too much of an opening for Bill Belichick to take the UNC job. But maybe it does show that he's at least interested in the college level, and maybe we'd be more willing for a bigger job down the road. Then you'd have Lincoln Riley and UCF. This was one of the other head-scratching headlines that we saw this past week, and it was UCF reaching out to USC to just see what the interest level was from Lincoln Riley. Felt like one of those you might as well call type of calls, but at the end of the day, very interesting. One of those things that kind of gives you the idea of what's happening over there at USC. Seems like a lot of other people in the industry think that relationship is not quite going the way that they want it to. Now, Lincoln Riley has totally shot this down, said he's very happy where he is. We'll obviously keep an eye out on it. I don't expect him to be the next coach of UCF. He could not be the coach of USC next year. We'll see what happens there. Definitely a lot of NFL jobs and some different things that could come available. It'll be interesting to see what Lincoln Riley does at the end of this year, but probably not going to be UCF. I assume it will be USC next year, but still a little bit up in the air around him. Texas Tech made their coordinator hire. They lost Zach Kittley to FAU as their head coach last week, and they got Mac Leftwich, a very talented guy, the OC from Texas State. He's done an incredible job over there with the Bobcats, and I think he will do an incredible job at Texas Tech. He probably won't be there long, if I'm being totally honest. I think this guy's head coach written all over him, but he's in a position right now where you officially made that jump to the Power 4 level. Now it's about kind of scaling your performance and doing a little bit better than you were at Texas State, and then see if you can get that head coaching job. He's a very, very talented guy, and I think Texas Tech did a great job kind of filling a Zach Kittley hire that was absolutely incredible by FAU. Tony Sunseri is this might be my favorite hire of the cycle thus far. It sounds like he could be making his way over to LA. It sounds like he might be the new Bruins offensive coordinator. Eric Bieniemy was fired yesterday, something that a lot of people expected. I don't think there was any question that was going to happen. They pretty much immediately hired Tony Sunseri, the Indiana co-offensive coordinator, and as their OC. This dude is a beast. He's absolutely incredible. Did a great job at JMU with Tony Centeno, very talented kid, and definitely a guy that is going to be a huge factor for UCLA going forward. Feels like the Bruins have something going over there. Feels like the Bruins have something brewing over there. A very, very talented guy, and definitely a staff that feels like it's going in the right direction. Maybe they're about to lap USC. As crazy as that sounds, UCLA is putting together a real staff that could be a load to deal with in the Big Ten next year. Matt Entz is back as a head coach after a short stint with USC as the linebackers coach. It is Fresno State that has hired him. He went 60-10 while at NDSU and won some national titles while there. He's an incredible guy. A really incredible head coach. Obviously got to the Power 4 level, just make sure that he was there before all the craziness happened, but handled business, was able to take over for Jeff Tedford over there at Fresno State, and cannot wait to see what this guy can do. I think he's going to be an incredible head coach, and will be in the Pac-12 here pretty soon with Fresno State. Trent Dilfer is going to be retained from at UAB. Relatively shocking news, if I'm being totally honest. I think Trent Dilfer is a fine head coach. It was a weird year over there at UAB with a lot of different questions, with a lot of different things on the table, and a lot of things for them to figure out. So it is going to be him going forward. It is going to be him in the next little bit, and we'll see what happens over there in UAB as he heads into his third year. But a lot of questions. I'll leave it at that for the time being. Definitely one of those that will be kind of on a hot seat heading into 2025. And we'll see if he's able to survive that, if he's able to curb a lot of the noise that is around him right now, because I don't think the fans are too happy about this one, if I'm being totally honest. We'll see what happens here. Obviously a guy that is capable of coaching winning football, but just hasn't quite yet around UAB. Urban Meyer had to come out and dispel some of the rumors talking about him possibly taking the Ohio State job back. He is not doing that. He has put all of his energy behind Ryan Day. Makes total sense. Very confusing times around Columbus. I've heard some murmurs. I won't necessarily say too aggressively, but it sounds like Ryan Day might be looking out. A lot of questions. I'll leave it at that for Ohio State right now. Definitely one of those things that you don't like to do if you're Urban Meyer. You don't like to have to come out and say that you're not taking the job from the guy that you gave the job to. But that's the position that they're in right now. We'll see what happens over the next couple of weeks. Maybe all of this talk is ridiculous in a couple of weeks because they're on their way to the national title. But as of right now, Urban Meyer had to come out and say that he is not going to take that job. Very weird around Ohio State right about now. We'll see what happens going forward. But definitely something that I was not expecting to see around this time of year. This is what we got for Ohio State. Moving on to a couple of injury updates as we head into this weekend. We'll start with Georgia, Texas. They're both relatively healthy heading into this one. For Georgia, they do have Trevor Etienne and Christian Miller, a running back and a defensive tackle, both listed as questionable. Will be huge players. Christian Miller is an absolute beast on the inside. Trevor Etienne was probably the best player on the field the last time these two met, outside of Jalen Walker, but he was a huge player for that offense in that game, and definitely will be a huge loss for this one. We'll see if Nate Frazier and those other running backs can pick up the slack there. For Texas, it's Kelvin Banks that is questionable for this game, the very talented offensive lineman. The way that I see it right now, I think Etienne is probably really unlikely to go. I think Kelvin Banks and Christian Miller are probably pretty likely to go. Depending on how long they'll stay in, I don't know. Definitely one of those things where Kelvin Banks is one that I'm a little bit up in the air with. Maybe we'll see Trevor Gooseby again come in for him, but definitely one of those things where two very talented guys on the offensive line or on the lines of scrimmage that I do think will step up to the plate. I do think will play this weekend. How long do they play? How effective are they? How close to 100% are they? Is a big-time question. And then I just don't think Trevor Etienne's going to go in this game, with the Texas defense loves to see after the last time they met him. And then Oregon, Penn State. This is one where feels like both teams are relatively healthy. Penn State sounds like they're going to get back Harrison Wallace as they head into this one, and that's huge. It's one of those players that you felt a little bit nervous about going into this weekend. Doesn't sound like it's going to be much of a problem. He should be ready to roll for this game, as well as a couple other rotational players on the back end. Then you do have Oregon. The big one here is Matthew Bedford is going to be out for the year, and the interior of that offensive line could be a huge thing. With guys like Zan Duran and Danny Dennis-Sutton on the other side, it could be a huge thing if he's not ready to go. Well, he'll not be ready to go. So we'll see what happens with his offensive line. They've done a great job picking up the slack for him since he's had a little bit of a limit on him throughout most of the year. So we'll see what happens with that offensive line, but definitely a huge loss there. Keon Hudson-Ware is another name to watch, where looks like he's relatively questionable right now. It'll be interesting to see if he does go. If he does go, how close to 100% is he? Is the offensive line for Penn State able to push him around a little bit? A lot of different things on the table for Oregon. So nothing necessarily major that they didn't know going into this week, like Matthew Bedford. They knew that going into this week. But outside of that, a couple of guys that could be banged up that could possibly have an effect on this game. And then you got SMU Clemson. SMU's in great shape. They're in really, really good shape. They are very healthy. Sounds like they could get back Romello Brinson in this game. So a lot of different things coming up for SMU. Since RJ Maryland went down, really, they've been a very healthy team for the majority of this year. Sounds like they will be that way tomorrow. And then for Clemson, Tyler Brown is not on track to, is on track to not play in this one. Wanted to make sure I read that right, but very talented guy. There's some optimism out there that he could possibly go. It doesn't sound like it's great, and if he does go, he probably won't be all that close to 100%. So definitely something to watch. Another playmaker on the outside for Clemson that could be just a little bit banged up going into this one. And then Arizona State, Iowa State. The news for Arizona State we've talked about a lot. Jordan Tyson is a huge loss for them, and definitely will be interesting to see if there's any wide receivers that step up in his stead. Iowa State, you're healthy right now. You're feeling pretty good going into this game. No lingering injuries no aggressive injuries. There's always lingering injuries this time of year, but Iowa State seems to be relatively healthy right now. They're going to go into this thing fully locked and loaded in. We'll see what happens in this one. Cannot wait. And overall, this weekend's going to be absolutely incredible. Cannot wait for these championship matchups to get underway. Cannot wait for Selection Sunday to start. And a lot of people to get mad, if we're being totally honest. If Clemson were to win and SMU were to be left out, I would be one of those people. But we'll talk about that on Monday, obviously. But that'll do it for this edition of the GSMC College Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Your support means a lot to us, so please remember to subscribe to the show, leave a positive review. It does make a huge difference. Also, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, all the social pages for all the content and updates you could possibly need. We have great people doing great work across every single sport you could want. So if you're not just a college football person, if you're every sport person, come on over to GSMC and we have you totally covered. But thank you once again for listening. We will be back on Monday to talk about the championship games, to talk about the playoff, to talk about just about everything around college football. So I'll see you then.